Try that again. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Ned Dennison. I'm the chairperson of the International Marathon Swimming Hall of Fame. We have a guest with us today, Honoree Susanne Guesdon from Tasmania, Australia. Please say hello.
Hello, Ned and everybody.
What I'm going to do first, folks, is I'm going to basically read her biography. It will give us an overview of her contributions over the years. And at some point here, I'm going to bring up that biography. Sorry, folks, I thought it was prepared. Give me 1 second. Okay, Sue was in the class of 2019, and she and her husband, Chris, are also Gold Family patrons. So thank you for your financial support in addition to everything else. Sue served as an open water administrator for more than 50 years, contributed to a wide range of goals, and assisted in many events across the world. The roles included race director, organizer, coach, handler, administrator, team official, lecturer, judge, health and fitness advisor, licensed boat captain, writer, and open water official. I'm sure, Sue, there's something you haven't done, but I can't think of it at the moment. Over this half century, she assisted in marathon events in Australia, Canada, Cook Islands, Fiji, France, Hong Kong, Indonesia, Italy, Papua New Guinea, United Kingdom, and the USA. That's one of the reasons we call it the International Marathon Swimming Hall of Fame. Just some examples of her contributions. She was an official at the 40-kilometer Port Phillip Bay Big Swim in 1968, coach handler in the English Channel, 1970, 75, and 1977. And for those of you who don't know, to go from Tasmania to Dover, England, is a long trip. Escort handler, Hong Kong, Repulse Bay Marathon, October 1977. Australia team coach handler for the silver medal team, the Pre-Naples World Championship, 1975. Official clerk of course and judge, Fiji Open Water Championships, 2001. FINA Open Water Swimming Certificate for Technical Official Clinic in the Cook Islands, 2007. And clerk of course official, Southeast Asia Games, 2009. She also received the Irving Davids Captain Roger W. Wheeler Memorial Award from the International Swimming Hall of Fame in 2019 for her contributions to the administration of open water swimming. So that's some resume. So let's start and talk to us about your involvement in swimming or other sports as a child and a teen.
Right. Well, my life really started on the water. My father had a fleet of boats. We had watercraft of all kinds. We had motor launches, yachts, dinghies, everything imaginable. And so we'd go away with the family and friends for weekends, and that's where I'd do my swimming. I didn't have any coaching or swimming training, but we swam in anchorages, in bays and inlets and that sort of thing. So that was good fun doing that with the family. So I did that a lot. And I loved paddling the small craft. I used to roll around as a little kid for ages in the dinghy off the back of the boat, and I'd go into all these little rivulets, and I loved being on the water. But my love was tennis. My first love was tennis, and I played competitive ball sports. So my ability really was with ball games. I played in teams. What did I wrote down here? I played in softball, hockey, racquetball, tennis, squash. Lived near the squash courts. I played that quite a bit. So lots and lots of teams and those sorts of sports until I met Chris Guesdon, and it all changed. Yeah, so that's how I started off. And I might have had some skill on the water or with balls, but I had no skill in the water.
So your husband Chris came out of the water in his Speedo, a little bit like Bo Derek in the movie 10. And I presume your interest involvement in marathon swimming started after meeting Chris. Tell us about the time, those years, the travels, and then talk a little bit about Chris, the marathon swimmer, if you would.
All right, then we met when we were both 17, and I was a student nurse just out of school not long out of school, and groups of friends met together at a jazz club one night. And Chris and I just hit it off because we were both sports nuts. We liked every sport under the sun. And he looked pretty good too. So we hit it off immediately. And at the time, Chris was swimming, playing water polo, and he was very much into the surf club, surf lifesaving. So that kind of became my life, at water polo and down at the surf club for long days, being told, get your clothes off, get some sun on you. And you can see I'm fair-skinned, and I used to get sunburnt, and Chris used to come home with a suntan, but I was always told, come on in the water, have a swim, whatever. But at that time, we'd go to various surf competitions around the place, but wherever we went, where there was a beach, and we've got a lot of beaches in Tasmania, if there was a rock or an island, Chris would want to go and swim around it or to it or whatever. That was how it all got going. He was doing quite well with his pool swimming, and the Truth Big Swim was going to take place in 1968 in Port Phillip Bay, and they were selecting the swimmers. Chris was one of those selected, and a funny thing about that was there was lots of publicity because it was the biggest swim in Australia at the time, and the news was all over the place. And the photographer and the journalist came down to Tasmania to get a photo and do a story on Chris as one of the entrants. And he got down level with the water in the pool, and Chris was standing on the block, and Chris was teased for weeks afterwards because he was written up in the paper as a powerfully built 6-footer because he looked tall. So there was a lot of teasing went on about that. But we went over to Melbourne. That was my first event as an official.
Before you move off that one, Sue, if I remember right, Port Phillip Bay, did you know ahead of time he was going to be in a shark cage?
No, we had absolutely no idea what a shark cage was back then. You know, we found that there were all sorts of new things to learn. We were such rookies, we had no idea. And then when he did learn about the shark cage, we went over, and there it was waiting at Port Arlington, and Dick was his coach at the time, and I remember them both looking at it and thinking, oh God, how are we going to cope with this? No practice or whatever in a shark cage. But I was seconded as an official for that event, mainly to make up the numbers, I guess, because I was only in my early 20s at the time. And it was really good that, you know, we wrote things down on, everything was on paper or by two-way radio or whatever, nothing like the events now. And I was on the boat with the main swimmers, and it was won by Linda McGill, and Des Redford was in the race as well. But Chris didn't seem to be coming with the other swimmers. I thought, whatever's going on? And then I heard them saying over the two-way radio, Guesdon hasn't got going yet. Evidently, his cage is, somebody's sabotaged his cage, and it was tied up underwater. And the boat couldn't get it going anyway, so he was very late starting. Oh, well, very late, like they'd all gone off. And he, and then the boat, because it was trying to tow this, I think it had revved the motor out of it anyway. They had motor problems all the way, so it was a bit of a shamozzle for him. But Linda McGill was the winner, and she was a great swimmer. It was good to watch her. Yeah, so that was my first event. Yeah. Oh, another thing about that swim, Chris was sponsored by the Banana Growers of Australia. And the day before the start of the race, this big semi-trailer arrived, and it had Chris's name, had Guesdon written across the side of the semi-trailer. It was full of bananas. And nobody knew what they were going to do with all these bananas. We weren't expecting them, and the organisers, I don't think were expecting that many. But the day after the swim, or it might have been 2 days after the swim, the Geelong Cup racing was on. So they got the trailer to deliver them to the races, and they were given out. That was a bit of a shock.
And you went further afield after that?
Yeah, just after that, Chris and I were married, and then we went overseas, 30 hours in plane, calling in at 5 places: Karachi, Calcutta, I don't know, Singapore, Calcutta, Karachi, Egypt, London, whatever, to get there. You know, it took a long time. We got to London. We worked there for a while, and while we were there, Chris worked in as a lifeguard in a pool, in an indoor pool in London. I worked in a laboratory on the other side of London, and he did most of his training there. Occasionally we'd go down to Dover or Folkestone for a swim in the open water. We were very, very naive back then, though, Ned. We didn't know a lot. It was still the 60s. And at some stage we were quite adventurous. We decided to take off in a station wagon with camping gear. I think we went to 25 countries. We went right up through the Western Europe to Scandinavia, and calling in it, of course, being nuts for sport, all the former Olympic venues, wherever we came across them, and swimming in these amazing indoor pools. They were just fantastic, continuing to do that. But we went through some historic places. We walked through Checkpoint Charlie, and we were locked up driving from through East Germany, from West Berlin through East Germany to get to West Germany, because we only had a letter of credit. There were no credit cards then, so we didn't have money. We just had this letter of credit to go to the bank with. And somebody came along and paid the money after we'd been locked in this place for I don't know how long. It seemed like half a day. Yeah. But they paid for us and said, "I don't like to see young international travellers in trouble." And off we went. So we went all the way down to, all through the former Yugoslavia, which is a whole lot of different countries now. And we went through Greece and to as far as Turkey. So it was a big trip, and a lot of, there was swimming in between.
So half of your friends were talking about the envious life you had traveling the world, and the other half were going, "The poor thing, dragged all over the place."
Yeah. Yes, you name it, we've been there, I think. Anyway, we went back to London, and that's when we met our mentors, really, at the English Channel. Audrey and Ray Scott, yeah, and they were wonderful. And I remember Audrey saying later years, when we went back to visit them, that we were their Australian equivalents, the chairman and the president and the secretary. Yeah. But we had lots of letter exchanges, and we played croquet on their lawn. They were wonderful people running the CSA. Yeah. So that was the early days, and one thing led to another, and then we got into the 70s, but we were into the running events by then, the Derwent River, and that's been a wonderful success, running the Derwent, and then travelling with the team overseas. Chris swam in Canada. We had to take our children with us, so yeah, quite an adventurous time we've had.
So as Chris's marathon swimming wound down a little bit, off to being an administrator, and you certainly a big part of that. How did your travel change at that point? I suspect your family started to arrive. How did you balance it all, Sue?
Well, when they were long trips, which they often had to be, because if we went away, because the distance was so great, and travel then wasn't like it is today, there weren't that many flights to choose from, and it was a very expensive thing to do as well then. More out of the average wage than it would be today. On the very long trips, we took the children with us. On ones that were a bit shorter, I had very, very good family support who would look after the children, and we had nannies. We had live-in nannies come. But when we took the children, we'd hire a camper van. I remember Chris swimming in North America, in Canada, and we had a huge camper van. It was like a mini house. And I was educating the children then, you know, we're doing schoolwork at the back of the camper van, but every now and then we'd have to call into a motel so Chris could get a decent night's sleep, so he was ready to swim. Yeah, so that was very adventurous too. And our children, they learned all sorts of things. They learned all about the international travel. They picked up the most amazing accents in every place we went to. They'd come away with the accent of that place. And yeah, so we learned a lot. And I remember in La Touque, in the lake at La Touque, Danielle, our 6-year-old then, she was 6 by then when we were there, and she swam in the lake after the swimmers had finished, or at some stage during the thing, it was a terrible place. She picked up some bug in the water and she was very ill, a bacteria. And we were flying from Montreal to London, and she became very ill on the plane, and she had to be treated by a Harley Street specialist in London. When we got there, she was hospitalised. And he put it down to something in the lake. But they had, sorry.
No, go ahead.
You know, we managed with them, and I think they benefited in life, because every time they went back to school here, the teachers would say, "Oh my God, they've come ahead in leaps and bounds." And my older daughter had the best vocabulary in the school because she'd been exposed to so many things. Yeah, so it was very beneficial as well.
You mentioned already honorees Linda McGill, MBE, and Ray and Audrey Scott for honorees. In your travels in those early days, did you meet other honorees, and who were the best of them? Who did you admire the most, and who scared you to death?
Oh, well, of course, Dick Campion is our great friend. Dick and Jackie Campion, we're lifelong friends. And because he first coached Chris, and then Chris handled for him. And Dick was an Olympian, and he swam in the final in the 1960 Rome Olympics. And so he could really swim. And he joined the surf, but he was a professional. He wasn't allowed to go in a lot of the races, because then there was the amateur professional thing, and because he was coaching swimming. And so he did really very well. So Chris had a good coach in him, and it was lovely to handle for him, because he did, you know, he was good. But Dick would be the first who comes to mind. Another one is Des Renford, who we came across Des a lot. We first met Des in 1968 at the Port Phillip Bay swim. But he came down to Tasmania to visit us, and then came back to do the Derwent River swim in 1975, and he conquered it. He was the first person to do that. And we went to visit him. You know, he visited us. We visited him and Patty in Maroubra, and also we've got a chandelier down in the lounge room that always reminds us of Des. Des had it sent down to us. It was one that I'd seen that I admired, you know, that was only available in Sydney. And so he sent it down, and every time I look at it, I think of Des. He was quite a character. And of course, we came across him in Dover as well, you know, when he was there. He was always there to swim the channel. Who else was there? Oh, of course, in the 80s, what was it, the 70s? No, that was the 70s. Sandra Bucher and John Kinsella, they're just fabulous swimmers to watch and see and be around, you know, absolutely incredible. Later in my career, in the 90s, Melissa Cunningham, I'm very close to Melissa. We bonded way back when, and Melissa Cunningham, now Roberts, I should say. She's humble. She doesn't ever boast about being a world champion, and but she's a strong person. And I don't know whether you've ever seen Melissa swim, Ned, but she's got she's got a really wonderful stroke, this long stroke. It's just so suited to the 25K that she was so good at. Grant Robinson for Australia was an excitement machine, and he had lots of wins for Australia. Shelley Taylor-Smith, a really tough, determined swimmer, and the dominance of her in her time over men and women was quite remarkable. And another Australian swimmer who I think Chris might have handled for her in her first official open water competition is Penny Palfrey. She, as you know, was a racer and an epic swimmer. So she was all of it tied into one little person, very, very strong person. And I remember at the not the pre-worlds, it was the Australian team trials in Melbourne, and a storm was there. It was really rough, terrible weather, and most of the swimmers had left the water, and who was still in there but one other swimmer, and Penny Palfrey. Never expect her to get out. She was she became a life friend, she and her husband. Yeah, so Chris and Penny are really good friends. And two other swimmers I've met on the circuit in Argentina and in America, and then lots of other places too. Atlantic City was one of them. There are two of them. Stefan Lecat, who is just super nice fellow and great swimmer, and Peter Stoichev. So yeah, they were two really, really good people. And Chris was then with FINA, and he really enjoyed their company, and I think they liked the fact that Chris had been a swimmer. He hadn't come through the official category, he'd come through as a competitor in that way, and so he understood what their needs and whatever. So yeah, so great swimmers, great fellows as well. Yeah. Edith Van Dyke was another. Sorry.
Besides Chris and Mr. Campion, who else? And the Scots, absolutely. Who else influenced your administrative career? Who did you look back to and say, so and so taught me a few tricks, or I really learned how to handle situations?
Right. Well, Ray and Audrey Scott, of course, about administration, because we spent a lot of time with them and spoke to them a lot. Roger Smith, who was the vice president of FINA, although he wasn't into open water swimming or marathon swimming specifically, he was a great influence, a great help in getting the Olympic event supported by the FINA Bureau, thus getting into the Olympics, because he told Chris way back then that they would never accept into the Olympics an event that was 25K or more, which was sort of like the event at the time. And he said to Chris, if you do nothing else, go away and come up with an event that will suit their requirements. And so that's how it came to be. Chris went away and we worked on that quite a bit. So that was Roger Smith, and he was always very supportive of all the Tasmanian officials. Very good man.
Before you leave that subject, Sue, it's actually a piece of history which many of the new folks in the sport don't understand. I think if marathon swimming could have had its choice, we all would have preferred in the Olympics a 25K point-to-point swim with every swimmer with a boat with their name on it, going around majestic headlands or across bays or whatever it was. That's what everybody would have ideally wanted. But the practicalities of getting it into the Olympics meant it was going to be 10K. It was probably going to be a number of circuits. It was probably going to be in the boat rowing basin or something like that. And so there are people who come in now and they go, 10K, it's not really what we think as a marathon. And I was asked the question, do you value us being in the Olympics or not? And they all go, oh, yeah. We love being in the Olympics. We just wish it was different. Now, hopefully in
Yes.
Paris, although they had a bad event a couple of weeks ago with the pollution, hopefully in Paris, we may actually see a point-to-point down the river, which would be absolutely stunning. And I know for Los Angeles, they're talking about a point-to-point along the coast. So we might get a 10K with some of the old time majestic named boats and point-to-point. But
yes.
So you were actually, you and Chris particularly was a real part of that history. Those compromises needed to be made, and the result is we're now in the Olympics, and it's a great thing for the sport.
That's right. And there are a few elements too to that, Ned, that having the 10K and designing it so it could be in a rowing basin didn't mean it had to be in a rowing basin. It just meant that it was adaptable to a rowing basin, that could be held anywhere if the physical properties of the place were adaptable to it. But it was also designed so that landlocked countries or countries that didn't have a nice ocean or area for doing a point-to-point swim, that the Olympic 10K wouldn't be missed out of that Olympics and maybe, lose it for further Olympics, because that meant every country could then hold an Olympic swimming marathon. And so there were a lot of elements to it that people don't realise had to be considered. I mean, of course, we all would have liked it, 25K or longer swim, but that's how it had to be or not exist.
Tell us about your favorite administrative moments over the years, including swimmers you handled that either won big races or gave amazing performances or suffered greatly, whatever it might have been.
Yes, well, I guess the I don't know whether this is considered a great thing. It's not. It was a funny thing that happened. One of the things was when Chris did a swim in Hong Kong around Silver Island and back with the Hong Kong Lifeguard Club, and we're on a sampan. I was handling him from a sampan with some of the Hong Kong lifeguard, and my young daughter was on board. The other one was locked in the Hong Kong Lifeguard Club president's office on a bamboo mat having a nap. And my other daughter was on the sampan where I was handling with Chris with a couple of the lifeguards. And on the way in, they were asking her, do you swim? Because you're sitting there with her swimmers on. And she swam the last 400, she was 6. She swam the last 400 metres of the swim with him. Well, they thought that was wonderful. They were ecstatic about that. And it was all over the newspapers, the news the next day, the Hong Kong, whatever the name of the paper, in Chinese writing. We had to get it, Chinese language, we had to get it translated. But I think she made more news than Chris did on that swim. So that was quite memorable. It was memorable for a mother anyway to see that happen. The best swim I've handled for would have to be Jenny Anderson passing lots of men and swimming so well in the Capri Naples, which was the International Long Distance Swimming Federation World Championship, they called it then, and she won the silver medal. Dinah Nyad incidentally was in that race, and I think we passed her about before we were even halfway. But the funny thing about that swim was, it was a remarkable swim, and Jenny Anderson, never to be underrated, bilateral breathing, not a word said the whole race, just her head down, swimming until I call her in for a drink or whatever. But we're on an open boat, and I had the pilot and the person looking at the swimmer, and while I was sitting on the boat, the sun was beating down. And they said, if you want to do a wee, here's a bucket and get some water out of there, and just sluice it across the deck. And I thought, I can't do that in front of 2 men who don't speak English, and I'm really embarrassed, whatever. So when the time, I was so hot I was drinking, And so when I decided to go, I got out over the back, over the stern of the boat, which was one with a tiller and a rudder. And I got in over the back and I hit the water and I couldn't go. And I thought, oh, you know, whatever. And so I let go and they were swimming. And when it was I can't swim at the speed of Jenny Anderson, and the boat was taking off for Naples. I was saying, "Woo, you better come back." Of course, poor Jenny, the boat had to come all the way back for me, pick me up, and continue on. But no, that was an amazing swim. That was really good. Another really remarkable one was when the Australian team won the World Team Championship at in Italy. I can't remember the name of the place. I should know it well. Anyway, in Italy, that was absolutely marvellous because so much work had gone into that. I came to the team a little bit late and I wasn't handling. Each swimmer had their own handler, but I was there well before the swim took place. But I brought all the extra luggage, like the Swimming Australia didn't have the caps and some of the equipment. So I was bringing equipment with me and coming over late. I had to wait for that to bring it, whatever. And I was kind of like the counsellor and first aid and all those sorts of, like the extra. And it was a remarkable effort because Melissa Cunningham won the gold medal. David Bates won the silver medal and Shelley Taylor-Smith won the bronze medal. David Bates was way up there and they counted the first 3 fastest times, so David's was the one that was counted. And they won the team gold medal as well and all those other medals. It was quite a remarkable event, really, for Australia.
And that victory was probably the culmination of a decade or more of work from you and Chris and Dick Campion of building up an Australian program, kind of outside of Swimming Australia, but and I don't know that Australia's had that kind of success since. That really was a remarkable pinnacle.
It was a remarkable, and just after that, 2 years later, it was in Evian, the World Cup. And we did just as well there as well. So it was quite remarkable results. Yeah. In the meantime, on that trip, the swimmers did the 24-hour and the 4 swimmers beat the 2 male teams and Shelley and Melissa were swimming with our 2 fellows. Yeah, so that was a remarkable effort as well. Yeah.
Sue, you had a great idea a couple of years ago that left an impression on me and also the sport. We credit you with the idea of honoring Dale Petronich's contribution by creating an award. We probably might have tweaked your final idea, but it's the Dale Petronich Award for services to the International Marathon Swimming Hall of Fame. So it's nothing to do with swimming or administration or anything like that. It's what has somebody done to actually benefit the Hall of Fame. So we thank you for that great idea. Were there any other ideas, great ideas that you had that somebody else got the credit for, or you didn't even, or no one knew about, or maybe we haven't implemented them yet?
No, golly, no. I think I might have run out of any new things now because I love to see the way the sport is changing. I hear a lot of people back from our era talking about, oh, if only we do this, but I think it's developed into something far greater and something really, really good now. I mean, that might have been good fun and everyone knew each other and the camaraderie was great. But people are doing remarkable things now and there are remarkable events around the world. And I also think that like with the Olympic event, for example, having the eye in the sky, and you can see people say, oh, you can't see the swimmer now, but you can see the individual swimmer. You can concentrate on the leader, close up, whatever, and see what his tactics are or her tactics are and compare to them. So I love that development. But I've been going for a long time and more than 50 years. And I think that's my best achievement, the length of time, and yeah, and helping people with their dreams. I love the fact, one of the nice things that makes me feel good is the development programs in some of the developing countries, and helping them set up events and teaching the officials in that area, because, you know, the coaches now get FINA come to them, a lot of them, whatever, but back then nobody did. And so that was really good. I really like, and I see them now having events and doing well, so that's good.
On that, Sue,
educating
before you leave that topic, I want to plant with the sport a couple of things. It wasn't that long ago, 20 years ago, where an English Channel swimmer set off, and within 2 hours, communication stopped. So no communication. There was no ALS to find the boat. There was no social media. There was no phone coverage. There was no news after 2 hours. And then, you know, the average swim is 13 hours. So you're talking another 11 hours to France, and then probably 3 more hours back to phone coverage. So your friend, your swimmer, your pupil disappeared from the world for 15 hours. And now you've got a social media coordinator on a lot of these boats sending out messages. And so technology has really changed that completely. And I guess the second one that I would say is that we've interviewed some of the early swimmers who, for example, swam from Gibraltar. And they said, well, we had to write a letter to the swimming authorities in Gibraltar, and they would write back to us, and we'd write back to them. And then we had to go find a boat pilot. And then they insisted that we have a shark cage. So we had to go find somebody to make a shark cage. And then we swam out, and, you know, there was a last minute hassle of negotiating with a Coast Guard or trying to get the approvals and everything like that. And now one of our honor organizations is the Gibraltar Strait Association. You contact them. There's a giant waiting list, but within 2 years, you arrive in Tarifa. There's a crew that's done it 50 to 100 times. You stay in a nice place. All the stress and drama is taken away. Okay, you might have to wait for the weather, but you get in a boat and away you go, you know, jump in the water and do your swim. So there are now hundreds and hundreds of organized marathon swims around the world, which you can organize by internet and credit card. You can take a cheap airline flight out, and you show up and it's all sorted out. And 20, 30 years ago, those swims didn't exist. Those events didn't exist. Yeah. And if you wanted to go to Hong Kong and do a big swim, you know, or Fiji or Brazil, you know, it wasn't easy. So a lot of great things have changed. I guess my final question for you, Sue, is looking back, what are you most proud of in your administrative career?
Most proud of, I guess helping those developing nations is up there. Putting on events and making sure that everything was safe. Having a background as a nurse before I was a businesswoman with my husband, health and safety always was high on my mind. Even with our teams when we're away, that was always a priority with me, making sure they were okay. And I think my length of time, and I think helping the developing nations and helping swimmers achieve what they wanted to achieve, because really there's nothing in it for a person like me. It's a satisfaction seeing it all develop, and being a barracker and a supporter, you know, that's really a good thing to have too. But for every swimmer that I've counselled or applied grease to them, or given them first aid, or counselled them, or whatever, and yeah, they've gone on to do their great things, and I admire them for that. Yeah, that's great.
So Sue, thank you very much for your time today. One of the bedrocks of the sport, and sometimes us prima donna swimmers don't recognize it, is there are thousands, if not tens of thousands of volunteers working the sport, working the events, organizations. Almost none of them are ever paid anything. Occasionally they might get a drink, a dodgy lunch, or occasionally a seat at a year-end banquet. And the sport just does not operate without those thousands or tens of thousands of willing volunteers who are rarely thanked. So Sue, on behalf of the sport, thank you for 50 plus years of giving. You've made a huge difference.
Oh, that's nice to hear. And, you know, the sport's in a good place, and that fills me with joy.
Take care.
Yeah, it does.